Hello everyone, Elite Clockwoman here. Episode 13 of the SKIBIDI multiverse was released not long ago. And guys, it was the most legendary episode of all time. And I'm just in shock how Dom Studio was able to make such a high-quality episode in such a short time. And that's crazy. And the scale of the episode reminds me of episode 66 of SKIBIDI Toilet. And it's incredible. Okay, I'll just be overwhelmed with emotions. Take some cookies and tea, and we'll start. The episode begins with the agents quickly running somewhere. And for the first time, we see how the drillmen move underground, and it's very cool. And we see that the big drillman stopped because his drill broke. But another drillman tried to fix it, and at that time, cameraman shows that something is happening from above. Then we see that the drill was repaired and drillman drilled the way up, and POV cameraman lays out on the outside. And we see a very large-scale war of the Alliance against the toilets. We also see the Titan drill, and that everything is fine with him, and I'm very happy for him. We can also notice that he has a new core, or rather, some kind of light in his chest, but it is not the same as it was before. Anyway, we see that the battle is taking place at an airport, perhaps somewhere in Dubai, and this airport is very similar to the one that was in episode 60 and 65 of the SKIBIDI Toilet. And we can say that this is a mutant base, and further there will be confirmation of this. We see how POV cameraman is running somewhere, but suddenly he is hit in the head, and this is a SKIBIDI man who also appeared in other episodes. And we can notice that his eyes are completely white, and I don't think I've seen this before. And the mutant is trying to strangle the cameraman. But here the question is, how can he strangle the robot if robots don't breathe air? Anyway, we see how the spear hit the mutant in the head, and another cameraman gives a signal for the POV cameraman to run after him. But suddenly this SKIBIDI helicopter falls into the cameraman, and the poor fellow dies. But there is no time to sit, and the cameraman takes the baton and continues on his way. So we see how this mutant shoots acid, but our cameraman successfully washes it off. And in this frame, we can see the mutant's eyes. And just look how red they are. Perhaps this is berserk mode, or this mutant is very crazy. Next, we see how the machine gunner begins firing at agents, and our cameraman tried to hide in the building, and he was saved by a Titan drill. And then we see the inscription, SKIBIDI Laboratory Base 4, and it becomes clear that the toilets have several laboratories, and this is one of them. And our cameraman, no matter what, continues to run, but he is knocked down by a mutant on his Hummer. On credit, we can also notice that this is the mutant who was in episode 10. Or is it a mutant of the same type? And we see how a Titan drill destroys a tower with mutants, and it's crazy, just like in some movie. And then we see barrels of acid with some kind of flammable liquid, but our cameraman manages to jump, and the credit hammer explodes, and the cameraman continues to run again. We see that there are fights everywhere, but the cameraman doesn't stop, and a SKIBIDI helicopter falls in front of him, and the cameraman waited for this moment and set off again. But a new mutant stood in his way, but he was instantly driven over by a forklift, but another mutant appeared. And it's like the end for cameraman, but Plunger Man came to help and begins to beat up the weakling. And then Plunger Man freezes him with the help of his white plungers, and I really like this ability. And press like bottom it if you wanted it to be in the original series. Anyway, Plunger Man destroys the enemy, and our cameraman moves on. And here we see the main entrance to the laboratory, and the cameraman goes there. And from this moment, the most interesting thing begins. We see how the speaker closes the door, and we see a laboratory of toilets. There are a lot of computers here as well as some kind of equipment. But the most interesting thing is the board. We see that there are crossed out symbols here, but what does this mean? I think that this number of experiments is possible on a new type of toilet, which will be very strong, perhaps as strong as Titans. There are 36 attempts, and we see that none of them succeeded. But who knows? Perhaps this has some other meaning, but write what you think about this in the comments. Anyway, we see how one of the mutants snuck into the laboratory, and he uses shockers to paralyze the speaker man. And this is possibly the main scientist in this laboratory, but suddenly, an arrow flies into his head, and an Elite Clockman and ISO toilet come inside, and it seems that everything is fine. They will save everyone, but in reality, they won't save everyone. Clockman shows a gesture that everything is fine, but for some reason, they show the board in this frame. But why? Perhaps the POV cameraman suspected something or realized what it all meant. But then we see the speakerman reading a book about the apocalypse. And probably this book describes all the plans for toilets that they want to implement. That is, destroy all creatures and dominate the entire planet. And this terrified the speaker, that he even began to shake with fear, and he shows that there is something terrible in the books. But suddenly his head is torn off, and we see a strange mechanical hand behind the Clockman. And it turns out that the Elite Clockman and ISO toilet are traitors. And they are on the side of the toilets? I'm not so sure, but now I'll explain everything to you. Previously, in episode 11, we saw Morse code where it was written friends and a question mark. And even then, I think that there is something dirty there, and perhaps they are traitors. And now we see that they killed the poor speaker man. But they killed him precisely at the moment when the speakerman read a book about the apocalypse. And it's possible that it says something that is too early for us to see. Perhaps the elite clockman and ISO toilet are not on the side of the toilets, but they have their own goal. Since we saw how they killed mutants, but now they also killed agents, which means that now we have three sides, Toilet Alliance and YouTubers. Also, on the screen in the ISO, it says no spoilers. It is possible that they simply maintain a balance between the parties and want everything to be fair. Because if the Alliance finds out the whole plan of the mutants, then it will be easy for them to come up with their own plan and win this war. Perhaps so there is, but also write your version in the comments. And we also see how Clockman kills POV cameraman, who was already very lucky to survive. And then we see Moby, who takes a book with information, and ISO Toilet burns the book so that no one else can see it. Also, these two guys have interesting abilities. Clockman has a cheat arrow that destroys everything in its path, as well as a very strange mechanical arm. And ISO Toilet can teleport, and also has a special light that can burn any object. The TV woman had the same ability in the original series. Anyway, ISO Toilet approaches the cameraman, and on his screen we see the inscription sorry. And this is where the episode ends. And what can I say about this episode? As for me, it was the most legendary episode of all. Here we saw a very large-scale and very detailed war between the Alliance and the Toilets. We also now have a lot of questions related to what will happen next. What can we expect from these two guys? I still think that they are on the neutral side and they simply maintain the balance of power. And that's why it said sorry on the screen. Because they didn't want to kill the agents, but they had to do it to maintain the balance of power. But what will happen next? And why didn't TV Man Titan appear? Honestly, it's very difficult to guess what will happen next. But I think that in the next episode, we will definitely see TV Men Titan. And perhaps new episodes will be released every 3 or 5 days. But it's also possible that the Dom Studio will take a short break after this episode, since it was the most difficult to develop. But you'd better subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications, as I will definitely inform you about all the news about this universe. Also press like bottom it if you want me to release more content on the SKIBIDI multiverse. Elite Clockwoman out.